Free mind, you crazy for this. Soulful. It's like our responsibility to make us feel something. You know, to make people feel. Make people feel what we feeling. Hey, yo.
Reggie here, and I want to bring you guys some breaking news. This information just found its way to me a short while ago, and admittedly, I am still digesting what this might mean, but there are, I think, some takeaways that we can immediately have from this news that has come out regarding foreign comics. And this news actually came out from CGC a short while ago, and I've read through some of the material a few times, and you know, I'm still trying to work my way through it. But what I think is really fascinating about this is that potentially there are many aspects, I think, of comics and collectibles that are essentially overlooked and potentially even undervalued. Foreign comics potentially are one of those areas that has been overlooked, may be undervalued, and that could actually be shifting as a result of what CGC may be doing right now. This investment into foreign comics could have some ramifications. It could have ramifications on the popularity of foreign language comics, the values of those comics, and then also it may result in some new entrants into the marketplace. And it'll be interesting to see how far this actually goes, right? With the investment from CGC, it will be very interesting to see if others jump on board with some of this stuff. So manga exploding, not surprising. No, you're wrong, sir. I'll tease it. So let's dig into some of it. Squirrel Madness seems like he is a recipient of the same alert that I received. But this news that we're about to talk about is related to CGC specifically. To CGC calling themselves the world leader in authenticating and grading international comics. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about this news and what it might actually mean. So this is essentially the page. This is a new page, I do believe, that is on the CGC website. It is cgccomics.com/international comics. And on this page, they actually go through a little bit of background and history on foreign comics. And they highlight here that foreign comics have been around for a very long period of time. But when we, as I guess maybe North Americans or people in the US think about it, we only think about American comics. But the reality is that there have been foreign comics out there for a very long time. And then, of course, during the Silver Age, there was an explosion of other countries leveraging some of the characters and content that was being created here in the US for their own versions. And it highlights here that comic books have flourished worldwide in many different genres and styles, attaining cultural significance in several countries like France, Italy, Brazil, and also Japan. Now it does not specifically mention manga. They're still referring to these as comics, so it is unclear to me whether this includes manga in that definition, right? There are some people that draw a distinction between manga and comics. Others, as we demonstrated before with Comicron, make no distinction between the two. It is all essentially the same as far as they're concerned. So I'm not sure how CGC is defining it, but it appears to be more of the traditional North American interpretation of comics. And so here they kind of illustrate here to illustrate the diversity of the international market. 20 versions of Punisher's first appearance in ASM 129 were released in 17 different countries over subsequent years. And they actually highlight some of these different versions. And it's very clear that this is Amazing Spider-Man issue number 129, something that I posted on my Instagram just the other day. But I will tell you, these comics, these foreign language comics, by and large, are something that a lot of collectors, I think, overlook. And maybe it's just me, or maybe it's just me that does that. Like, I don't really pay attention to foreign language comics. I speak one language, and that's English, and everything else, I can't do it, but potentially this move move by CGC will have some ramifications on the desirability and potentially also the value of some of these comics. But one of the things here that they highlight as far as their investment, it says CGC has teamed up with Rob Wrong, I think that's how you say it, on Instagram as Foreign Comic Keys. He said he is, I guess, a leading international comic book collector who provided his expertise and extensive database to accurately identify and categorize the country of origin and publisher for each comic. Two critical factors. So how I read this is that CGC recognizes that there's a certain amount of expertise and experience that is required in order for them to actually grade these comics correctly. And they've partnered up with somebody that is very much that expert, and it is Rob Wrong, Foreign Comic Keys. And it sounds like when I read this, I'm also reading that they've tapped into his database, which means that they've given him some money in exchange for his database and experience to put them in a position to accurately be able to grade and classify these comics, these foreign language comics, in the right way. This next little section, they go into some background of foreign comics and U.S. comics from the Golden Age, from the Silver Bronze Age, and also from modern. But down here, it actually speaks to how CGC classifies international comic books. And they basically highlight that these things fall into three distinct categories, those being unique editions, foreign editions, and price variants. And again, these are things that maybe we as, North American collectors really haven't done a whole lot of. I think that maybe when it comes to the price variants, people in Canada maybe have done a little bit of that. And then I think a lot of the people in the UK are also on those pence price variants. And my buddy Hydra Collectibles, Luke, I think has an entire series on the whole pence variant. And so again, that's why I'm saying that if CGC is making an investment here, potentially it will have some ramifications. So the first category that they identified here are unique edition comics. And the way that I kind of interpret this is that these are mostly unique, original creations, right? Even if they're leveraging characters from the US, oftentimes the cover art and the interior art is completely redone and tells a completely different story. There is, in other words, no US counterpart for many of these comics. And it says here, during the early years, many international comic books contained American characters, exhibited covers that were not copied from the US comic books, but rather redrawn or even completely original. And so again, these are standalone type of comics that have no counterpart here in the US. It says interior content was usually a black and white mix of stories randomly lifted from different US titles and publishers of the time, with some original content added. Even though there are a few covers that have US counterparts, the entire run of these titles are classified by CGC as unique editions. And so they have a couple of examples of what some of these unique editions actually look like. You can see we have some Tarzan, some Spider-Man, Batman, Fantastic Four going on right there. All right. So there is another category. The second category are foreign editions. And the way that I'm kind of looking at this is that there is a US counterpart to these comics, but they are not facsimile editions. And you see there that the language is also very different, but you can see that that's a Hulk. I think, is that Hulk 2 or Hulk 6? I can't remember. One of the Hulks right there is that cover. But it says this classification is assigned to international comics that feature a cover to which a US counterpart exists, but is not a facsimile. The covers of most foreign editions are slightly or heavily altered, creating a broad spectrum of possibilities that range from near identical covers to redrawn covers that only copy the motif. All right. And it says, like cover alterations, the content of foreign editions can widely vary as well. So though you can see some examples here, some Batman, Incredible Hulk, Magnus the Robot Fighter, Superman, and also a little bit of some Spider-Man action here. ASM 14 is what that one is a cover of. And then the very last category that they've identified are the price variants. And you can see this category mainly encompasses US comics sold in English-speaking countries that are exact replicas of their US counterpart, the only difference being the price on the cover. And so with the other two examples here of the foreign editions and also the unique editions, I do believe that these comics were actually essentially produced, printed in different countries, whereas the price variants, I think, were oftentimes done here in the US and then shipped to those English speaking countries. So they were oftentimes also run at the exact same time. They just changed the cover plates and then swapped it out for, from the cents to the pence. And so you can see some examples of what some of these price variants actually look like, which includes, the US, UK, and then also Canada as well. And as you read through some of this, they talk a little bit about Disney comics. There's a little bit of an exception that's being made for the Disney comics. But then down here, what they also highlight is that in spite of the fact that the majority of foreign editions appear on newsstands months or even years after they were released in the US, it is the first time that readers in these countries were exposed to them. And so for this reason, essentially what they are doing is on the labels of these comics for the specific countries, they are going to highlight the significance of those issues. So you could have a ASM comic in Spain that is the first appearance of Venom, for example, right? Because it is the first time in that country that Venom was actually seen. So to this point, you could have, every country could have an ASM 300 that has the first appearance of Venom. It is not just the US version that will carry that designation. And so again, for this reason, there could be also some value increases that are seen with these comics. And here you can see the Philippines there, the Mexico version, a Mexican version of ASM 300 that was released in 1989, the Spanish version in 1989, the French version in 1990, et cetera, as they kind of flip through these things. I did not know that there were that many covers out there, but there you go. Russia, Hungary, Italy, that is quite impressive. And so down here at the bottom, one of the other things that they highlight is that there will be the ability to search for these foreign language comics, whether they be the unique, the foreign edition, or the price variant in the population report. So you will be able to use the CGC census to actually search for these comics. And so some of my big questions are, will this have an impact on the value of some of these foreign comics? Will it drive people in North America and even in other countries to seek these comics out, driving the desirability of them? Will we start to see a pricing service that actually pulls in and starts to value these comics as well? Because you would assume that there is probably some sales data out there for these comics. I mean, it may be a daunting task to get the sales data from those countries, but there is sales data out there. And so again, it's going to be interesting to see how some of this stuff plays out. So for those folks that are joining a little bit late, CGC, the world leader in authenticating and grading international comics, seems to be making an investment in foreign language comics. This is a new page that they've set up. At least I think it's a new page that they've set up here on the website, cgccomics.com/international comics, in which they talk about what they are going to be doing to grade and essentially categorize these foreign language comics. So let me go back to the chat real quick to see what folks are talking about. There's a question here that is unrelated, but there's a question here. What's the best way to ship a comic? I would say if you search YouTube for Regie Collects Shipping, you should be able to find a ton of videos out there that will give you guidance on shipping raw comics, graded comics to and fro. All right, so let me see. Scrolling through some of the comments here. No, I'm gonna tell you, I don't think that I'm going to get into these waters. I'll be completely honest. I have my hands full with just the US version of these comics. I don't know that I'm going to personally go out of my way to hunt these comics down. But I think that there are some people out there that have always enjoyed international comics and have been waiting for maybe some recognition from the industry that these comics are indeed unique and special and worthy of proper treatment. And so that's part of the reason why I'm covering it, is because I think that, you know, this is recognition for a lot of people that have been collecting these comics for a long time. I know Comic Tom actually has some of these comics in his, I do believe, in his own personal inventory. I've seen a couple of posts that he's put up about this. So Phil Tassi says, time to take a trip to Europe to go comic hunting. Niles, welcome to the chat, brother. Definitely good to see you. I think it's a niche that will stay niche for a while longer. I don't know that I disagree with that. I don't know that I disagree with that point. So scrolling through, it's only a matter of time. Glad I got my Italian FF49 before it blew up. Again, it'll be very interesting to see how it all plays out. Are the grading prices the same? That's a good question. There is a section here on grading that I did not dig into. There is a way to submit them. It says, because many international comics have yet to be entered into the CGC database and foreign editions are often involve two titles and issue numbers, they must be manually entered. So for right now, it appears that manual entry is the only way. There is no mention of a price differential. So my guess is that the pricing might be the same. But again, this is something to maybe dig into. Niles is like, nah, that's not for me. I'll stick with the rare indie books. Let me see. Yeah. So there you go. Couple an outsider's view outside the United States' view of some of this. He says in the German part of Europe, there are basically two kinds of comic collectors: people that collect the US originals and people that collect the German versions. Two totally different communities. There you go. That's some awesome insight to have. Turbo Man says, if I run across them, I may pick them up. Will not hunt them though. There you go. Scrolling through some of the comments here. So far, CGC rarely got international comics right, since the cover does not always hint at the stories inside. Oftentimes, they mix them up, or the comic contains 2 to 4. Yeah. So I think that that's why they are pointing to this expert here. Let me see if I can pull this up real quick. They are pointing to the fact that they have teamed up with this guy right here, Foreign Comic Keys on Instagram, because it appears that he has an impressive database of foreign language comics. And so I think that maybe what they are doing is they are recognizing, to that last point, that they have indeed gotten some things wrong. And so they are potentially partnering up with this guy to ensure that they maybe reduce the inaccuracies. But to the point, they actually do cite here that oftentimes the covers don't necessarily match up with the interiors, and that sometimes the interiors actually combine multiple different comics, even from different titles, right, into one. So I think they are going to try to focus at least on the covers. That was my impression. Let me try to follow that guy back. It seems that he followed me, but we'll follow him back, and we may have to see if we can get him on the show. Let me go back to this article or this page to see whether there's some additional details here that are relevant to the conversation. There is no comprehensive documentation of each country's output over the decades. Previously unknown editions still often surface. They talk about paper ranging from newspaper print to heavy cardstock, and the dimensions varied from digest to magazine format. So seems like, again, like there's a lot to be uncovered here. But they appear to be making a little bit of an investment. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with this. Let me go through. Squirrel Madness says he just started following. There you go. It seems like that may not be a bad guy to get to know, because he may have some expertise. So for those folks that are joining a little bit late, I am bringing a little bit of some breaking news from the folks over at CGC. They seem to be making an investment into foreign language comics. They're going to appear to be partnering up with somebody that is an expert in foreign language comics. They are recognizing that foreign language comics exist, and they have identified 3 unique categories. And let me go back to look at those. Let me see if I can stop this real quick, and I'm gonna go back and look at the 3 different categories that CGC has essentially identified. that they are going to be focusing on. They are unique editions, and these appear to be comics that, by and large, even though they may be derived somewhat from a U.S. comic or at least use U.S. characters, they are unique unto themselves, right? The cover art is oftentimes redrawn. The interior pages are oftentimes redrawn. So these are unique editions, unique comics that do not have a US counterpart that can be clearly and easily identified. Then there are foreign editions, and foreign editions actually do have a US counterpart. And these are not facsimiles either, but they do have a US counterpart. And then the third are price variants. So these are your pence variants, your Canadian price variants, and things like that. So those are, they even call it out right there, Canadian price variant. So these are the three unique categories that CGC has identified for these foreign language comics. And then they do something a little bit different for the Disney comics. They say exception to these rules is the foreign version of Disney comics. Even if a foreign version features a US cover, CGC will classify the Disney comic by its foreign title and issue, but will also display the US counterpart title and issue on the label itself. So a little bit of something different that they are doing for the Disney comics. It isn't quite clear why they're doing that. But this article, or this page, if you will, goes on to talk about how the first appearances will be called out on the labels of these foreign comics, because in their countries, the first appearances are significant. And so they are going to be highlighting those, which means that there could be several different first appearances for Venom all across the world. And as you can see some examples of some of these comics where you could see similar cover art, very different language, but these are all first appearances of Venom. And they also highlight here that this data will be contained in the CGC census. So let me scroll back over here. Again, I appreciate the external view of some of this stuff. I definitely appreciate you commenting, brother. So thank you very much for continuing to kind of add to the dialogue. Baby Bell, how you doing? So for those folks that came in a little bit late, CGC is doing some things that could have some ramifications specifically for foreign language comics. And in my mind, the things that I think about are, will we see some different pricing for these foreign language comics? Because one of the big questions a lot of people have oftentimes is, I have this foreign language comic, what is it worth? And what is it worth in relation to the US comic? It'll be interesting to see whether a pricing service picks up this mantle and starts to represent those prices. Like occasionally you will see a price difference for Canadian, but I'm not sure about some of the other price variants, for example. And then I do not believe there is a pricing service that actually covers the foreign language comics, but I could be wrong about that. Again, this is not my area of expertise, so I could be wrong about that, but it will be interesting to see if there is a value increase, if there is an appreciation increase where people are actually going out and now getting these comics and hunting them down, whether a pricing service will pick up the mantle and start to represent the values associated with these comics. It'll be very interesting to see how a lot of this plays out. And part of it is, I wonder if what we are seeing right now is the continued investment, if you will, of CGC into their overall growth, right? Are they going to continue expanding into foreign comics? Are they going to be setting up more foreign offices? Because that was something that was speculated on as well with the acquisition of the company, that we might see them set up different offices in different parts of the world, because now there is a viable customer base there that can support what they're trying to do. It'll be very interesting to see if it happens. Considering I'm Canadian, I don't have very many. I just sent off two or three Wolverine comics that were Canadian price variants. So I just sent those off to CGC not that long ago. So the Spanish version for Avengers 196 first appearance of Taskmaster is Black Knight Green, which I find better, says Pretty Fly. Do you have that comic, brother? Do you have that one? I'm curious. Scrolling through some of the comments here, I think I'm all caught up I think I am indeed all caught up. I don't think I've missed anything, which is good. So there you go. I wanted to jump on here real quick and kind of share this news with you guys. Hopefully some of this will help. It'll, again, for like the 20th time, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, because the reality is that it could have some impact. On the other end of the spectrum, it could mean nothing. So only time will tell how it plays out. But I want to thank you guys for hanging out with me just a little bit. As always, if you need to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.